Trump's gonna respond. Well, if there's one thing we've learned in 3 years, it's that Trump will always respond. You ask a dumb question, Trump's gonna respond.
With CNN and your fake news. The fake news, which is you and you.
Impeachment testimony, Trump's gonna respond.
I want nothing. I want nothing. I want no quid pro quo.
Storm our embassy in Iraq? Boy, will Trump respond.
The U.S. military confirming it carried out a strike near Baghdad airport, killing Qasem Soleimani.
The Defense Department tonight has confirmed that the United States has killed Iranian General Qasem Soleimani.
A rocket attack on the Baghdad airport kills Iran's most revered military leader.
Most revered. Yeah, a U.S. drone took out the guy who helped direct wars in Iraq, Syria, Yemen, and Lebanon. A guy whose efforts led to the deaths of hundreds of Americans in Iraq. He was a bad guy doing really bad things for a really long time. So is it bad to kill a bad guy?
No one should be shedding any tears for Qasem Soleimani. He was, in fact, responsible for, he had American blood on his hands. But at the same time, I think the fact, as Ambassador Sherman said, that the consequences of this could be unbelievable.
Qasem Soleimani is a ruthless, ruthless killer. There is no doubt about that. Nobody weeps that he is gone. But that said, the Obama administration, at least to my knowledge, did not go after him and target him because we understood what the consequences were.
Everything comes with a but. Oh, terrible, terrible guy, terrible guy, terrible guy. But, and consequences? Look, Iran already doesn't like us. Hasn't liked us for decades. Iran's been not liking us way before Trump was elected president. Hell, it's been not liking us way before the Trump Tower was even built. But taking out a bad guy is bad because Trump.
What I think is going on here, frankly, is that this action was taken more in President Trump's self-interest rather than our national interest.
Still a charmer. Self-interest. Okay, Trump ran a campaign on avoiding quagmires, and his supporters had their fill with Iraq, Libya, and Syria. So this action seems the opposite of self-interest. It's a country's interest, our country. If you ask me, Trump took action to stop a war, not start one.
We took action last night to stop a war. We did not take action to start a war.
See? I love being right. Yeah. My first prediction of the year is 100% on. So he's sending a clear message that Trump means what he says, that it's never a good idea to stake out your army in another country and plan attacks against the U.S. and think that you're going to get away with it. Not while he's president, at least. But thank God the media is focusing on the stuff that matters. Over at CNN, what was their best headline? President Trump dined on ice cream as news of the airstrike broke. As if Trump indulging in a sweetened dairy product makes the strike that much worse. Not for me, CNN. It actually makes it that much better. I mean, wouldn't you want your president to be eating ice cream while he eliminates a mass murderer? I do. I'd say that's pretty cool. Meanwhile, the experts on all the networks say we are one step closer to war, which raises the question, who exactly is an expert? On Iran, Iraq, or the Middle East in general, where is their proof of success beyond feverish appearances on cable news shows? No one has ever gotten that region right, ever. And anyone who sees the killing of a murderous general as worse than sending pallets of money to that general's country can be no expert. He can be a moron. Now, one other expert warned that this wasn't just any old killing. True, this wasn't just some ISIS fighter. It was a top general, a powerful leader of an adversarial government. So, hooray. I mean, really, isn't the killing of old generals by drone preferable to sending waves of young men and women to their deaths on a battlefield? So maybe this doesn't mean war at all. War is when the old generals send young people to die. Under Trump, we just kill those old generals. And this is my favorite part, as you know. He did it with a flying robot. That's progress.
What's the best kept secret to becoming a great singer?
Thank you, Mr. President. The killing of Iran's Revolutionary Guard Quds Force leader Qasem Soleimani needed to happen, and President Donald Trump was the man to do it. Everyone knew the blood of Americans was on his hands, responsible for the murder of more than 600 American service members and thousands of others whose blood and limbs were spilled and left on the sands of the Middle East. He implemented the explosive devices capable of piercing through our American armor. His ruthless reign of terror, both celebrated and legendary against Americans, our allies, and Muslims, would have continued had this monster not been stopped. The president did not risk a single life in his effort to eliminate this sadistic beast who, according to all reports as well as his history, was a clear and present danger to America. Folks, you know the president means what he says and says what he means. He is not interested in war. He is interested in America and protecting it. And in so doing, he will take swift, decisive, and strategic action and take no prisoners along the way. Whether they'll admit it or not, all Americans should be thankful. Our allies should be thankful. Indeed, the world should be thankful for the removal of the world's most dangerous terrorist. Folks, this day has been 40 years in the making. I told you last year that Iran was determined to provoke us, and indeed was provoking us. And to all those who criticize the president for not trying diplomacy, a primer. This president has repeatedly tried diplomacy, stepped back, talked about restraint, and refused to take action when ironically criticized for not doing so. Take a listen. In the last month, as Iran has reacted to the economic stranglehold under which it is suffering because of the sanctions President Trump has put on it, a far cry, by the way, from the rollover reward of $150 billion Obama gave them and gave that regime, which was used to fund terrorism throughout the world, Iran is responding with extreme provocation, hitting oil tankers. When an American drone, however, with a wingspan as wide as a 737, was brought down by an Iranian missile, it seemed that Iran was determined to provoke us. The president was ready to conduct strikes, but pulled back because, as he said,
they shot down an unmanned drone, plane, whatever you want to call it, and here we are sitting with 150 dead people, and I didn't like it. I didn't think it was proportionate.
And in the last 2 weeks, Iran has been responsible for an attack on a U.S. embassy in Iraq where an American was killed. Remind you of Benghazi? The parallels are frightening. Soleimani actually helped plan the Benghazi attack, where 4 Americans were killed, and our last president never bothered to respond, while he and his gang of apologists said the massacre of Americans was due to a video. Here, this President Trump took swift and precise action. His response where an American was killed was immediate. Yes, indeed. The days of appeasement are over. Gone are the days when the U.S. feats Iran, brings her to the table to give her $150 billion and an additional $400 million on pallets flown in unmarked planes, as the United States lets out the Gitmo detainees to return to the battlefield. We now have a president who negotiates from strength, not from weakness. A man who has exhibited tremendous restraint while constantly being provoked by Iran. His red line was the killing of an American, and true to his word, it was only then that he responded. He had tried everything, and economic sanctions were imposed, themselves recognized as appropriate and responsible action in the spectrum of diplomacy, and yet they continued to poke the eye of the tiger. The president even tweeted, "Iran will pay a very big price for any damage or loss of life." Quote, "This is not a warning, it's a threat." So, should we roll over and let them kill us? Should we decide who should be killed first, or how many of us we will tolerate being killed before we act? Should we allow further casualties? It's not an act of war. It's not unauthorized force when the commander-in-chief is defending Americans from imminent deadly harm. And for those bozos who say that the president is using Iran to distract us from impeachment, he could have done this on any one of the last 1,079 days because they've been trying to impeach him since day one. And Chuck Schumer says this.
This action may well have brought our nation closer to another endless war. Exactly the kind of endless war the president promised he would not drag us into.
So, for Chuck and all you snowflakes who say this means war, I've got news for you. We have already been in a shadow war with Iran for decades. They haven't confronted us with conventional military action because they're weak, and we have superpower capabilities thanks to President Donald J. Trump. They've prosecuted their war against us by the use primarily of non-state proxies like Hezbollah in Lebanon, the Houthis in Yemen, Hamas and Islamic Jihad, as well as the Shia militants in Iraq, Syria, and Lebanon. So, Iran denies responsibility, and they conduct a shadow war with relative impunity, from taking hostages in '79 to blowing up the Marine barracks and killing 220 Marines, blowing up our embassy in Beirut in 1983, to the most recent attack on oil tankers in an attempt to knock out the world's oil production in retaliation for our pulling out of the Iran nuclear deal and the imposition of economic sanctions. In fact, Soleimani himself is quoted as saying, "It is time to take our swords out and teach them a lesson." By taking out Soleimani, we have put the Iranians on notice that its use of proxies will no longer protect those who plan or give orders for attacks against us. They personally will be held responsible. Trump's attack was precise. It avoided a needless loss of civilian life. It did not entail boots on the ground. So does this mean inevitable war? No one can predict where this will lead. The Iranians have multiple military and economic interests in America, which they can target. However, they now know their use of proxies will not.
You are watching CGRB, Conservative Gospel Radio Broadcast, and to watch the full episode of Judge Janine and killing Soleimani needed to happen. Trump was the man to do it. Okay, if you want to watch the full episode, I'm going to put it on my playlist, and the one before that, Greg Gutfield, I'm going to put it on our playlist too. So you'll be able to find them on the playlist. So God bless you. Stevens, Pirro, Smith, CGRB broadcast.